Have you been losing out on multiple offer scenarios, but you feel like you're definitely putting in the highest price? Well, maybe it's not just the price that seller is looking for. If you've been in this situation and you want to know how to win a multiple offer scenario, stick around, we're going to break it down today. Hey everybody, welcome back. It is Central Maine's realtor Nick Isgro with eXp Realty, and today we're going to get ourselves a little bit inside the mind of the seller so that you can figure out all of the factors that the seller is thinking as they're looking at multiple offers. Now, if you're a seller and you're watching this, think about this too, because you're going to potentially be presented with multiple offer scenarios in front of you. And there's not just the price to consider. So on your end, you might want to pay attention to the end of this video as well. If you're a buyer, you definitely want to know, because sometimes we often hear, hey, we just got to keep increasing the price. That's not always the case, and we're going to break that down in a minute. Before I get into any of that, I want to welcome you here to the channel. If you've never been here before, we cover all things real estate here in the state of Maine, but particularly right here in the Central Maine market. If that's of interest to you or adds value to your process in the buying and selling of homes, do me a favor, go ahead, like this video, hit subscribe, knock that little alarm bell. You'll be notified every time I put out new content. All right, now jumping right in, let's go right in at the top. Let's go with the most obvious thing in a multiple offer scenario. What is the seller looking at? Of course, they're gonna look at the price. Now, price is not everything, and we're going to go through about 4 more other items on this list so you can see that that's not the case. But of course, you have to be in the competitive range. So if somebody is potentially offering, let's say somebody's offering asking price at least in a multiple offer scenario, and you offer $20,000 less, probably regardless of some of the other conditions, depending on circumstances, I know there's always a one-off, you might not be the most competitive offer. Likewise, if it's a situation where there's 5 or 6 offers, the house is top quality, you're working with your real estate agent, you know that it was priced correctly for the market, then chances are you're going to have to offer over asking price. And what you want to do is work through some comparables, to make sure that the offer you're putting in is actually going to get you an asset that's valued at the amount that you're willing to pay for it. And B, you just want to make sure that you're going to be competitive. So you have to try to estimate where you think your offer is going to come in. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's go through all of the other things that sellers really are considering and need to consider when they're deciding what is the best offer for them to accept on a multiple offer scenario. So the next thing I want to get into is financing method. And there's a lot of people that don't understand that sometimes this does play into it. You have your cash offers always going to be the strongest offer on the table. You're going to have, conventional financing, FHA loans, USDA loans, VA loans, all of which in themselves, by the way, are great financial products. However, if somebody comes to the table and let's say has a conventional loan with 20% down and there's an FHA loan that has 3.5% down, then just based off the financing alone, that 20% down is going to be a stronger metric in that category. I'm not saying the entire offer is going to be the same. I have one where I'm actually working on right now today with a seller. It looks like the FHA offer is going to be the strongest because they ended up waiving contingencies, and we'll get into that in a minute. The point being, don't get frustrated. Maybe all you qualify for is an FHA loan. This is just one metric that the seller is going to be looking at. But if let's say you have an FHA, or I had a scenario earlier this year where we had a buyer come in, I was working with the seller, they had a VA loan financed at 100%. They ended up switching the offer to conventional financing, 20% down. That was enough for the sellers to say, all right, this makes this a really, really strong offer. We really like the feel of this. Let's move forward with this one. So financing type does make a difference. Not all of the difference in the world, but it's something to look at. So I just mentioned contingencies. Let's move right into that. Contingencies are a big deal, particularly in the market right now. A year ago, it was nothing for people to start waiving inspections or, financing contingencies or contingencies for, houses for sale. That's not really been the case. As you know, we went through a market shift late last summer, went through the fall and the winter time. that's starting to tick back up a little bit. And what we're seeing is now that we're back to multi-offer scenarios, there are some folks out there who are willing to waive inspections or maybe make the inspection period from 10 days down to 5 days. For example, that's one that I've just looked at recently. Just a way to make it, more comfortable for the seller that this is going to move forward, going to move fast. Caveat here is I never actually recommend to a client that they waive inspections. However, sometimes it might be the right tool that you need to get you over the finish line, and it certainly is going to make that seller think twice. Even if you offer less money total in the offer, when I say prices and everything, you may have somebody that's offered more than you, but maybe they want 10-day inspections. Maybe you've offered just a little bit less, so your offer on the price side is still financially competitive, but you're willing to waive those inspections or waive that contingency period. That's going to push your offer into an equally strong place because the seller has to really consider, how well they're going to move forward. Again, not something I ever actually put out there as a recommendation. I do put it out there as an option, and there are times where folks can really, by the quality of the house, by looking at the build, get a somewhat of a comfort level, and it really comes down to what does the client want? What do you, the buyer, want to do? It's not about what I want to do. I'm going to give you my advice. Ultimately, the buyer makes the decision. Sometimes this is a way that if you can't totally compete on price, you can definitely make your offer hyper competitive. The next thing that sellers are really going to look at as far as looking at competitive offers are earnest deposits. This isn't something that we talk about probably often enough, and that is the size of the earnest deposit. If you're the only offer on the table and you've got $1,000, $2,000 for the earnest deposit, not really a big deal. In a competitive bid scenario, the seller has to sit there and think, if I go through all these offers, I don't want to make a mistake. I want to make sure I'm picking the offer that's going to get us to the closing table. Well, there's always that chance until you get to the closing table that it's not going to get to the closing table. So what is going to make that seller feel even more comfortable going with your offer? A much higher earnest deposit. Why is that? Well, because if it doesn't get to the closing table, they at least are not walking away with nothing. There's some negotiating chip on the table. It's going to probably keep the buyer interested, or at least have a much greater stake in moving the process forward, even beyond contingencies, to make sure that the deal gets done when it's supposed to get done by. The last thing I want to mention is something, again, not a lot of people think about, but this is trying to get the ideal transaction timeline. You want to work with the sellers if you're in a competitive scenario, because maybe they want to close really fast. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're really looking forward to hopefully working with someone that can give them a few extra weeks beyond the standard 30 to 45 days. If you work with the selling agent and find out what is it that they're really looking for, what's the timeline they want to work on, and you can work that and make it work for you, that's just another thing, another chip on the table that you have to make your offer super competitive. So that is it for today. I really wanted to get into this because we're seeing more competitive offer scenarios playing out in the market, and we're not really even into the heavy part of the spring market. We want to look at what is it that the seller is looking at? What is going on inside the seller's mind as they look at multiple offers? They're comparing the strengths and weaknesses of each. The big thing here, it's not always the price, although of course price does play into it. I hope you guys found that helpful. If you are in this scenario, maybe you've been in the scenario, maybe you were a seller and you saw some of these things play out in the house that you were selling. Maybe you've been a buyer and you were able to win a multi-offer scenario, or maybe you lost one. Whatever the scenario, drop a comment below. If you think I missed something, whatever your thoughts and comments, I love to hear them there. Please let me know. Of course, if you guys are looking for someone to go over this, and maybe you're just kind of testing the waters in the market right now, maybe you're even someone thinking about selling, but you're a little worried that you might get into this scenario and you're not sure how you're going to handle it, or maybe you're a buyer and you're just a little timid to get back into what might be a very competitive spring market. All of my contact information is linked in the post below. Reach out to me. I would love to connect and see how I could possibly help you. Of course, as always, I thank each and every one of you for sticking around to the end of this video, and until the next one, I'll see you next time.